there are commonalities that are very striking between all world religions I'm aware of and all creation myths. And one of them, and this is of course true for Christianity, very true, is that the belief that supernatural beings take physical form. They all believe that. The Greek myths, Jesus, most famously, but that they take physical form, that they're not just like some ethereal, they're not just shadows floating around, specters, fog, that they're physical. Like they're as real as the arm of your chair. And that they reproduce with people. Again, Christianity believes that. Jesus, immaculate conception, spirit reproduces with human woman. That's what the story is. And it's described in Genesis as well, in Genesis 6. But again, it's not just the religion of the ancient Hebrews or the religion of the modern Christians. It's Hinduism as well, and the animist religions, the religions of, to the extent we understand them or know about them, of the American Indians, all the same. So if every culture in the world that we know about, has left any kind of written or physical record, is reaching the same conclusions about something, maybe there's something there.
What's going on, guys? JT here with Paul from Understanding Conspiracy. And yeah, we were just on the Nephilim Death Squad's podcast, and we talked Nephilim, Tucker Carlson, and we talked Short Season of Satan. We obviously blew those guys' minds. So if you guys have not checked that out, go over to Paul's channel right now. Check that out because that's a good one. But what they brought up on that show was something that we talked about Tucker Carlson, and Paul and I both had talked about him before. And Paul's take was interesting, and I was saying, like, you know what, I need to go listen to that podcast, and we need to talk about it. Anyways, welcome to the show, Paul.
Thanks for having me back, Joey. So it's always a pleasure. Yeah, we messed those guys up with that millennial reign stuff.
That was actually pretty funny. Yeah, just like they did seem visibly shook, but I think the cool part about that was the light bulb. You know, like you could kind of see, especially in like Raven, it was just like he really, you could tell. I mean, in Top Lobster, you could just see he was thinking a lot. The click, I actually did like that, where it was you had the similar to what I said. Why should I care about Tataria? This is why. And then it's like,
oh yeah,
and it takes a whole new level. It's not some odd side, rabbit hole. It's like it might be the main one.
Well, that's what it does to people. I mean, it's not the first time I've done that to somebody. I had Bo from the Bump podcast on my channel for my podcast doing the Truth of Therapy sessions. And I was just talking with him about random stuff, and I asked him, have you heard about the millennial reign theory? And he's like, what's this? And I was like, well, it's... And I just casually explained what it was without thinking much about it. And you can see his mind. He was like... you can see just his countenance changed as I was explaining it to him. Then he was like asking me questions. He was like, that makes sense. I've never heard that before. And you could just see the cogs turning, and it was... I felt bad afterwards. I apologized to him after, says, I'm sorry. I know you didn't come on expecting to have your entire world just blown apart, but I was excited, I couldn't help telling more and more and more. So kind of, we did it to those guys as well, and I was a bit more intentional that time. But
it was good. But yeah, one thing that we were saying, so the Tucker Carlson thing. So I was funny. I actually had a TikTok go viral about showing the first time that Tucker was on Roseanne Barr's show, and like I said, I've never heard anyone as high profile as him talk about the Nephilim. And so like especially the way in the context he was talking about it was not, hey, did you know there's this thing in the Bible about the angels had sex with women and begat Nephilim? He was actually talking about in the context of who's actually running this satanic system that we live in.
And the people who run our society consider themselves gods, and that's why they're not explaining.
Boy, they do. They don't think they have to.
Oh, I've noticed.
They don't think. I think I was talking to somebody, and they said to me, well, they think they're more than human.
Oh, obviously.
Yeah. I go, they're not even human, because humans care about their environment and their neighbors, and humans care about other people's children.
Of course.
And humans care about living things.
Yes.
But they don't do any of that. And he goes, because they think they're more than human.
Oh, I noticed.
They
That's why
think
they
they're
want to live
royals. They think they're like royals in a rarefied sphere of DNA or something above us. Like, did they come from another planet? When
I
you
can't
hear people
speculate on
talk,
that.
I can't either. But
This is the podcast to speculate on it, though. if you
well,
guys want
because
to.
some
Feel free.
people say, a lot of religious people, they're into some deep rabbit holes of things, and I don't know anything.
Well, you can see why they are, though. I mean, speaking for myself, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know if this is the Nephilim, right?
I was going to say,
I don't.
Oh,
I
God,
know.
here we go.
That's what I said.
No. Let
Not
me just
you,
say.
her.
I said
You're
I
fine.
don't know
Right.
I don't
anything about that stuff. Okay, I'm a
does.
very ordinary middle-aged man who spent his life following politics, not
Right.
theology. But I do know that whatever's going on is very deep.
Yeah.
I've spent my whole life around politicians and seen decisions get made, interviewed people who run things, and what's happening now is qualitatively different. So different that it's not in the same category at all.
No.
This is hurting people for the sake of hurting them. This is lying for the sake of lying. This is, as the devil
Power
hates
for the
holy
sake
water,
of-
they hate the truth. You tell the truth about anything. It almost doesn't matter what it's about. It doesn't have to be about the next election.
That's
It can
right.
just be about history, for example. Telling the truth about history. Why should that offend
Oh,
anybody?
that really pisses
Periods
them
where
off.
everyone's dead. And we can't, of course, change the past, so there's nothing really at stake for us now, right? You would think people would welcome open-minded historical inquiry to get closer to what actually happened in whatever period or in whatever event. They hate that.
Yes, they
Well,
do.
what are you watching? You're watching someone who hates the truth because it's true. And there's no possible profit motive that is driving that. There's no political end that is driving that. They hate the truth because it's true. Now we're in the realm of theology.
I was kind of blown away that Tucker Carlson, he literally at that point, he had probably just left Fox News within it'd probably been 6 months or something. But he was just there. And so, as who've been talking about stuff like this for years, it was fringe, and then it's obviously grown. It's still it's amazing when you hear somebody like Tucker Carlson talking about it. But now he's mentioned very similar things on Joe Rogan's podcast.
He was seeing these flying saucers, these discs that were moving over mountains.
Well, right. I mean, the prophet Ezekiel writes about it in the
Right.
first chapter, wheels in the sky.
Yeah, that's a crazy one. Boy, when you
Well,
read
it is
that,
crazy. If you
Yeah.
if you read it, it's like, oh wow.
Yeah.
And
A wheel
so
within a
and not
wheel.
just, the Hebrew scriptures, like it's all over every,
the Vedic texts.
of course. So these are spiritual phenomenon. There's no evidence they're from another planet. I mean, I think that's that's the lie, that they're from Mars. Look, space, the atmosphere is really well monitored, right? Both for defense reasons, but also because, it'd be nice to know when asteroids are coming. And there's no evidence, has never been any evidence that there are lots of these objects, these vehicles coming into our atmosphere from somewhere else, some other planet. There's no evidence of that at all. So they're from here, and they've been here for thousands of years, whatever they are. And it's pretty clear to me that they're spiritual entities, whatever that means. They're supernatural, and which is to say, supernatural means above the natural, above the observable nature. And they don't behave according to the laws of science as measured by people, and they've been here for a long time. And there's a ton of evidence they're under the ocean and under the ground. So, with that fact set, what do you conclude?
And now, most recently, he was just on Sean Ryan's podcast, or another big podcast.
And maybe it's not so crazy to think that what everyone else has always thought since the beginning of time, which that there is this combination in cases of, human beings and the spiritual realm, whatever that is. I can speak about it with no precision at all because I don't understand the specifics of it, but I know that it has been written about since people have been writing. And so it's a little weird to think that in 1945, really the day we dropped that first bomb on Hiroshima, from then until now, it's just a speck of time in the continuum of history. For that one period, we've assumed that's not true, but everyone else has always assumed it is true. I'm kind of going with everyone else on that, just on the odds, okay?
It's gotten to the point where we have to kind of address it of what do you think this means? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? What do you think, Paul?
Well, as I explained on the Nephilim Death Squad, it's kind of, the topic of the Nephilim is not new. I am relatively new to the game of YouTube. I've been doing it since 2014, so 10 years I've been doing this, and I've been discussing the Nephilim for that time, off the back of the work of many other researchers far better than I am who have been doing this for decades, and they've been explaining this concept of Genesis 6, fallen angels mating with human women in rebellion against God to create hybrid monsters we call the Nephilim. And then they all died, and then there was a flood, and mainly the cause for the flood was because of the corruption that took place due to these monsters. Then they became demons on the earth as disembodied spirits, and they still cause issues for us today. And that's the entire story just summed up there. And to us, this is boilerplate basic stuff. We've been talking about this for years. In fact, it's kind of boring to us now because we've been doing it for so long. It's kind of we're way past it. Yeah.
Well, a little bit. It's funny because, like I said, Brian and I made Ancient Angels. Paul's got a book that is it currently out, or is it?
It's being published in a few weeks. Actually.
Okay, so Paul has a book about the clowns look like Nephilim, or the Nephilim look like clowns. Is that?
I went for the Nephilim look like clowns in the end,
okay.
But yes, technically it's the other way around. But it doesn't roll off the tongue as well as the Nephilim look like clowns.
So if you think about it, like guys like us have been talking about this stuff for a while, and yeah, like you said, this is not our topic. This is an old subject. This was new to us at some point. And so the interesting part about this, again, so it wasn't until a few years ago that I discovered this. And I was like, I've gone to school, Christian schools. I went to church every Sunday. And like, I couldn't believe that I ever missed this. And at the time, there wasn't that many people talking about it. At least nobody in my close personal circle except for my brother. But then I started to, as it blew my mind, I started making content, TikToks and stuff. And so, ultimately making a movie about it, where myself and my friends, like just my circle of friends, we have had so many viral videos talking about the Nephilim over the past couple of years that I would say not even without a shadow of doubt, hundreds of millions of views between my friends' videos. And so you think about it, like, how many more people know about the Nephilim than knew about it 2 years ago, 3 years ago? I mean, so that's what we're kind of wondering. We're like, it's getting to the point where now you have a very credible, like literally news person discussing that this actually could be related to the chaos in this world. And
that's exactly the point. If you think about it, we've been talking about this for so long. We already understood that there's been this agenda at play and the spiritual forces working against us. And we've kind of already well established this, and it has been getting exponential. Like you said, more and more people are discussing the Nephilim, and it's getting kind of the cat's out of the bag. You can't really keep this hidden anymore. And for someone like Tucker to suddenly now, let's be honest, like maybe a decade and a half late to the game, discussing the Nephilim, people like me and yourself, and again, better researchers than me who've been written many more books than I have talking about this subject, can't help but raise an eyebrow and think, so what's your game then? Why have you suddenly started speaking up about something that we've already basically boxed off and sussed and figured out years ago? Why? And my theory, which I posited, is that it's kind of, I want to assume the best. Maybe Tucker is just on his journey. Everybody has a different level of understanding and comes at things from different places, and therefore I can't judge his heart or know if it's genuine or not. But we also know, as just conspiracy theorists, that they will give us our leaders. And when it comes to topics, they do like to control the direction of the thoughts behind certain topics. And for a public figure who we know has ties to the CIA, we have seen wearing suspect bracelets, shall we say, and we know has been in the mainstream as basically a home figure for millions of people for a long time. For them to start talking about it, it feels a little bit controlled opposition-y, but I don't want to assume that is the case, because I could be wrong, and again, I don't know Tucker's heart. And so, like I also said when we listened to his interviews, I don't feel like he said anything wrong yet. Everything he's saying is actually pretty on point. Again, that's all true, but we have to wait, because we have to see once he's got the people on board, where is he going to go next with it? And we have to watch. now. That's all we really can do, and hopefully it's all for the good. But I'm suspect. What can I say?
I'm definitely suspect, but it's interesting. So the last podcast I listened to, the Sean Ryan one, it's only a small portion of it that he starts talking about these kind of spiritual issues. I mean, he kind of like overarching. It seems like if you just believe what he says, he's had a change and he's had some kind of reflection in his life that's recent. It could obviously have something to do with, he brings it back to like 2016 with the election of Trump and, being disillusioned about Washington and then all the craziness that happened since then. And obviously him getting fired. But he kind of hints at, he's been talking to certain people. He never says, oh, well, I talked to so-and-so, or he doesn't point to some kind of like person is like a devout Christian you've heard of. He's not talking to like, well, Tom Horn's no longer with us, but people like that. He's not talking about Gary Wayne. He doesn't bring up anybody specifically. So I kind of am wondering, like, so who does he trust in these kind of things? But yeah, overall, I think Tucker Carlson to me is likable. He seems like he's kind of got this aw shucks about him, and he's humble in the way, but it's almost like, is he really being humble? Is he, or does he just know how to, the guy's been in TV forever. So, I mean, like, how much of it's real? I'm with you that I want to believe him. I mean, I want to believe him, but obviously I feel like it would be really naive to fully trust him. It's kind of like even the Russell Brand thing where everybody, probably because of the Kanye thing. So everyone like, oh, Kanye's got a gospel album. Kanye's like saying sounded sincere things about being born again. And then he goes, now he's got a porn channel or something like that. Like, so it automatically Russell Brand we can't believe him. And it's like, okay, wait. Like we don't have to immediately point out every bad thing he does yet. We should actually probably, what is like love hopes all things. Like we want to believe that it's genuine. It does not. I think the real problem with when celebrities have a conversion, because they're already like, big personalities and they're charismatic. Oh, well, like you said, this should be our leader now. We've got a leader. We've got a celebrity of our own, and they can be our mouthpiece. When if you believe like we're born again, well, if somebody was just born again, well, then they're like a newborn baby Christian. They're the last person that needs to lead. They're the people that kind of actually need to learn a little bit, and they need to be humble about what they know. But I mean, obviously, it's difficult for those, in those kind of situations because they are like, these people are leaders. They are leaders, but they shouldn't be leading. They're not in any position to lead the church. But yes, so Tucker Carlson specifically, if you listen to the podcast, I mean, he pretty much straight up says that his dad was involved in that, without saying it explicitly, he was involved in Project Mockingbird. If you guys aren't aware of that, he is related to, like, he's a news person who was a mouthpiece for the CIA. I guess Putin, when they did an interview, pointed out that Tucker Carlson interviewed to be at the CIA, and he got denied, supposedly. And then he became a news person like his dad. And then he later even says that he was involved in disinformation campaigns. And now he says unknowingly, but he's kind of saying all of these things at one time, and you're like, it would be naive to believe that he doesn't have some kind of level of like, I didn't know any of these things before. Like he really came to all these revelations about, hey, the government's not good. It's like, you knew, like you're from Washington. I find that to be a little bit incredible, hard to believe that he didn't know certain things about, like, JFK and then 9/11. He started to learn these things. Like, did he ever question these things before?
Well, I mean, come on. I mean, we weren't born yesterday.
Right.
And he certainly wasn't born yesterday either. Like I said, he's been in the game. He's had family and parents in the game. He cannot be that naive. I mean, maybe he is, but he's certainly playing the role of somebody who's just convincingly enough. He's playing a good job. If it is a role, it's believable that he really has just begun to actually question things for the first time, and he's seeing some stuff. And like you said, he says he's talked to people. Now he's not talked to like the authors like Gary Wayne, or I doubt he got a chance to have a conversation with Rob Skeever back in the day.
Right.
I imagine he's been talking to insiders in government organisations or in institutions, whatever that may be, scientific or technological. I imagine he's interviewed a few people, as he actually says in the show, who've basically worked for these organisations and said some things like, I don't know what I saw, I don't know what was going on there, but that was weird. And he says he's heard this so many times from so many different people that he's kind of pieced a puzzle together and realised something spiritual and dodgy and psychedelic is going on behind the scenes. That seems to be his narrative now. And as he says in his interview, he can't keep hearing all these stories about the spiritual reality and entities going against us that aren't human and just ignore it for any longer. But then he also says this odd, strange thing, doesn't he? Where he's like, I've heard enough, I don't want to know anymore. I don't it's weird,
What he says, it's really dark. He's like, oh, it's really dark. I don't want to know anymore.
And I've actually stopped gathering string on, as we say in reporting, stopped gathering string in this, gathering information, because I'm satisfied that I know enough, and I don't really want to know that much more. Because what I think I know is, this doesn't help me at all to know that. So that's a conclusion I've reached. I'm usually pretty curious. I've stopped being curious about this because I don't want to know anymore. But
you truly don't want to know anymore about it.
I think I know. I think I know what's up. So I can't prove it, so probably not going to articulate it, but I think I know what's up, yeah. But
can you articulate it?
Well, I think it's a really old story. I think it's a really old story. So that's what I think.
So what do you know then? Because it sounds like you know a lot more than you're saying, because it's like really dark. It's kind of like, obviously, he's straight up saying stuff's demonic. Okay, we know that's dark, but I mean, like, to what level do you not want to know? And he goes as far as, the one thing that's kind of crazy is how in agreement we are on a lot of things. Like I said, because in the Roseanne podcast, he's literally talking about these people the Nephilim could be running things still. And then he on with like guys like Rogan, he basically says this UFO alien phenomenon is demons, angels, spiritual beings. They're not from outer space. And then he even goes to the level of saying that the government is likely, people in the government are likely in league with these people, or working with them in some kind of way. And you're like, that is, that's saying a lot. So at some point you're like, if they're trying to pull a psyop with him, they are kind of giving away a lot of things that we would say, like, without, but yeah, like, but to go that far, and then like, even like that guy, Sean Ryan, he killed me. So Sean Ryan, if you guys are not aware, he's got a giant podcast. He was a former SEAL. He was a CIA contractor. He's got a few other titles, but he was saying that Tucker Carlson was looking into Building 7 of 9/11, the 9/11 stuff. And he'd never looked into it until he was going to interview Tucker so he could know what he was talking about. And I was just like, yeah, like, were we born yesterday? Because I think that's like, maybe that's the kind of thing that you could kind of fool some of the normies who really haven't even looked into 9/11. But if you are a news person, and it's kind of like, flat earth, it's like, a lot of things like that we look into that we're not believers until we try to go debunk it. You would think if you were Tucker Carlson, or if you were one of these guys, you hear so many people saying, this is an inside job, this is that, well, I'm going to go debunk it. And then you're going to find out pretty quick that there's something to this. And like, you wouldn't have done that in 20 years. Like, you didn't just do that. So like, you're kind of listening to this, and it's like, it sounds sincere. There's a lot of things that makes perfect sense. But then, then you have the connections, the Kabbalah bracelet, you have the CIA connections, and then you have this, like, it's too much all shucks. Like, you weren't that innocent until yesterday. So like, I did like that take that you had. Now, that's one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you, was I say that maybe this is one of those things where the groundswell of people talking about these issues is too much to, like, they can no longer just control like these 501(c)(3) churches and say, hey, tell everybody that the Nephilim are not actually what you think they are. The sons of God are not angels. They're actually the sons of Seth. All that spiritual stuff in the Bible is really not actually what it means. And so what they have to do now is they have to get out ahead of it. They have to
Mm-hmm.
give you here's the leader guy. It's Tucker
Mm-hmm.
now. And then
Oh, yeah.
obviously the worrisome part is that if he's saying all these true things and Paul and I can't actually disagree with him about any of it, then it will be like an endorsement from us. And then one day they'll kind of take the baton from guys like, the Nephilim look like clowns and ancient angels. And because Tucker's obviously got a way bigger platform than we could ever hope to have. And he'll be the leader. And what he'll say will have more authority because he does have the gravitas.
Well, I don't think it'll be permanent. I mean, they've been doing this for a long time. So, when the truther culture first started to swell, maybe around post 2001, that's when it really started to gather traction, especially on the internet, and then you started to get conspiracy theorists as a thing, as a weaponized term began to rise, and it was easy to crush them then because no one really had ever really questioned much until that point properly, in such a open forum style with the internet. And so what they did, they gave us our leaders then, and then people like David Icke or Alex Jones popped up, and they kind of co-opted the movement, and they became the leaders of the truth movement. Mm-hmm. And then other leaders began to crop up because then the truth movement started to divide. And David Icke was heavily going down the New Age route. He controlled the New Age hippie-style truthers who were all waking up and expanding their consciousness and that type of thing. And then you had Alex Jones who went down the more conservative Christian truther route, and he kind of hijacked a lot of those types, especially the American nationalist types, and it's a Hegelian dialectic. You divide the group, and the synthesis is always the same. You lead them down the wrong path to your goal, but you control both sides. And we've seen this happen over and over again. And the truth movement has fractured more and more and more since that time for a good 20 years, And more and more leaders have grown. And then you've got like the mainstream truther culture, which is all about the alt-right, call them, and the beyond the spiritual truther types, which have always had their leaders, which are kind of clearly controlled to make us look crazy type leaders, David Icke and Alex Jones, it's the lizard people versus the frogs are gay, the water's turning, the frogs are gay type people, but then that's not really the truth movement. They're just the leaders that have been put in front of us who gained that groundswell initially and took hold of them and led them down that path, But then outside of that, you have the political truthers. You've got the anonymous, the one percenters, the anonymous mass people wearing truther types, the ultra-liberal, hyper-communist, capitalist type truthers, who have a lot of valid things to say about the state of money and leadership and hierarchy is true. But then you have the counter alt-right, which goes against that kind of movement, which is a hyper nationalist, more about traditional values in a political sense as well, and kind of like a faux religiosity behind it. The traditional trad West is the best type attitude, But again, that's clearly a control. But both of them are clearly controlled movements because even the mainstream media is reporting on them and getting people involved in it because they would rather you were on those type of truther hypes than you were at. Mainly political trutherism is where they want you. They don't really want you thinking about, demons, Nephilim, spiritual warfare, the reality of God and Christ, and the agendas at play, Satanism. They don't really want you in that realm, but they've always been there, and that culture, people like me and you who are really getting it just straight to the bottom of it, like this is what's really going on and this is why type of people. Forget all the bluster, forget the left-right paradigms, forget the Hegelian dialectics. What's really going on underneath is a spiritual warfare situation. Well, it's taken 20 years, but here we are, and now we have figureheads in the mainstream talking about what we've been talking about all along since the very beginning, but all the distractions are just not working anymore.
Well, what's interesting is you say that is that that's specifically what Tucker said on that podcast, was saying that kind of like the one thing that the government is trying to not let people believe that any of this spiritual stuff is correct. So it's like, it does seem like it. Again, this sounds correct what he's saying, that like they're slowly, or not slowly, I mean, they quickly came out with all this disclosure about UFOs and non-human biologics and every weird thing about, potential interdimensional aliens and motherships. All that, was that all dumped out there in order to say, well, they're obviously not demons or angels. Like that's preposterous, but they could be like literally coming from some mothership in outer space, like you know what I mean? Like that, maybe that actually does kind of make sense that they're willing to. Was that the government trying to get out in front of all of the stuff to counter the stuff that we've been talking about?
I think so. I think so. In some ways, yeah. It seems like the fake alien invasion has been like a brainchild of theirs for 100 years. You know, since the advent of media and the War of the Worlds broadcast, they've been trying to get people terrified of aliens coming and taking over since time immemorial. You know, that's kind of the end goal. And for then people like us to go around saying, nah, that isn't the case. You know, if anything does turn up, we're talking about spiritual entities here, not things from vast universes millions of miles away.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're getting more traction saying this, they had to do something, and they've got to, you know, maybe who knows, maybe they'll do a reboot of Big Bang Theory soon to try and propagate more of the scientism, brainwashing type of things. I don't know, you know, but they always try and push ahead and try and get the people locked back into human evolution. We're going to take control of it. Interdimensional or space beings may turn up, and then we'll join the Galactic Federation or something like that. Trump with his Space Force, you know, all these. They always have to try and keep that narrative going that aliens are just around the corner, because they're planning to do a false alien invasion of some kind, and we've known this for a long time. But to what end? We've always kind of struggled to figure out what the end goal is, and I think we may be starting to suss it now with the whole Millennial Kingdom theory. I think we're realizing now, okay, the alien invasion stuff makes a lot of sense. If
the alien invasion stuff actually makes even more sense with the Millennial Kingdom than what we were thinking if this is the end times. Like, I mean, to me, it makes a lot more sense. What I found interesting is, I'm not sure about Roseanne so much. I'm kind of speculating here. I think I heard her say something about drugs, but what I found interesting about like who he was talking to about these issues. So Joe Rogan, obviously famously drug addict, you know, like this guy is like promoting drugs like crazy, psychedelics, DMTs, talking about it all the time on his show. That guy, Sean Ryan, was talking about how he, you know, stopped drinking because he went through psychedelics therapy. He was promoting it. And I think Roseanne has talked about a little bit of that kind of stuff too. And I'm like, there's a kind, you know, it's kind of like when you listen to the podcast with those guys, it's like, he's kind of like, Tucker's kind of making sense to them. And they're kind of like, oh, yeah, this makes sense. And then they're in the same breath, they're talking about, oh yeah, I'm going to go down and do this DMT and everyone should do it. And it's like, you're not like, you know, like you almost think like if Tucker was really knew as much as he sounds like he knows, he might have said, hey, be careful with that, because if this is a spiritual phenomenon, you can't just take some magic mushrooms without potential spiritual consequences. And maybe that is kind of like the you know, I'm sure like guys like Paul and I, we, you know, every now and then we'll, you know, link up with people who are not quite on the same spiritual level or even believers. For one, you know, I think I always try to remain true to what I believe. And if I hear something I disagree with, I'll say it. But maybe that's the kind of thing where it's like Tucker Carlson is dropping the F-bomb every other word. He's kind of like talking about like all kinds of things that we wouldn't talk about as Christians, saying he's a Christian. He's even kind of on the same kind of getting on the same level as us, what we would say about spiritual beings and conspiracy theories. And then he's rubbing shoulders with people who are going to say, oh yeah, there's all these kind of spiritual weirdness, but go ahead, don't worry about it. Just go in the jungle, take the, you know, go drink right from the vine of the dead, and all be well.
Get down to Peru, get to that Amazon basin, get that ceremony, you know. I wrote about the ayahuasca ceremonies in my book, actually, because it's a huge part of my work on the Nephilim and how people do still communicate with them today, unbeknownst to themselves, through means like that. So yeah, for him to be talking about the Nephilim out of one side of his mouth and explaining how this is a spiritual phenomenon, these things are controlling us, they're evil, we need to be careful, and, you know, they're working with nefarious people, and they're a problem. And then, obviously, like you said, to be then going to talk with people who are constantly going to these ayahuasca ceremonies and not calling them out and explaining how you do realize you're communicating with them when you're on it. You have to wonder. Yeah, but at the same time, as somebody who comes from the psychedelic world myself, prior to being born again and getting into the Christian angle and learning the truth about all these things, I can forgive him for talking to those people because they're not evil. You know, they're not stupid. And it could be, again, that sometimes we don't want to be
like maybe he just hasn't learned that yet. I mean,
exactly, yeah, because it's trippy stuff to start talking about. People see clowns and jesters when they take DMT, and what they're dealing with there are an ancient creature called the Nephilim. It's, to make those connections is pretty esoteric. You have to be in it for a while to get to that point type of stuff. And again, Tucker Carlson seems to be appealing more to a surface level mainstream audience, softly introducing them to the ideas of the Nephilim in that like I said, that humble, or shucks as you describe it manner. And I can see there's a place for that. So hopefully, again, I'm hopeful maybe he is genuine and he is really trying to tell the truth here. But if now I've got to that point where, if he's not going to talk about the Millennial Kingdom and where that fits into it now, perhaps
still
not a shell necessarily, but it's kind of you're missing a big piece. You're missing a big piece without that. It's kind of it like I say, recontextualizes everything. And just because some guy's explaining about the Nephilim to us, I mean, in what context then is he trying to warn people about the Nephilim? Is it as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man type stuff, and Nephilim were knocking about in Noah's time, Is it possible, like, they're trying to say the Nephilim are going to return just before, and that's a sign that Jesus is about to return? Or is he going down that angle in the future? Then I am going to start to get a bit dubious, because it's kind of like, well, that's exactly what the agenda actually is. It's to get people to believe we are living in the time before Jesus is about to return. And the Nephilim do kind of play a role in that. Context,
it's funny. I used to argue with people about this in the past about like the days of Noah, and I think that because we have done videos like Ancient Angels and that kind of stuff about the days of Noah, I really think the context Jesus was talking about the just like in the days of Noah will be so in the coming of the Son of Man. I really think that the only thing Jesus was really meant was that people won't be ready for this. Like the flood was what he was talking about. He was saying that these people were pretending like life was normal. They were just getting married. They were having parties. They were doing all the things. And guess what? The flood came. He wasn't, I don't think he's specifically saying like, you're going to have, 3,000 L giants or whatever tall they were. Yeah, I don't think he was saying that. He was really just saying like judgment was coming. But I do think that as somebody who has said this, probably like you did too, before we came to the short season, we thought, okay, well maybe the Nephilim are going to return, and then it's going to be like this, and then Jesus is going to come, then the tribulation is going to start. So if he starts pivoting to that, I mean, that plays right in the hands of all the people who are looking at the red heifers in Israel, and they're talking about all this stuff, and they're like, oh gosh, did you see what the sun and the moon is supposed to do this day? Obviously, the prophecies are coming true. Even Tucker sees it. And you could be like, for us, we'd be like, now we know, like that he's saying what is too on the nose. Actually, it's funny. Like Paul and I were talking before we talked on the Nephilim Death Squad. We were saying like the Tomb of Gilgamesh. We've talked about that a bunch of times. Like sometimes you have to wonder if you're being played when supposedly a leak in Hillary Clinton of all people's emails are talking about Nephilim, the Tomb of Gilgamesh, and all this kind of stuff. Like literally, like the biblical Nimrod is like who we believe he was. Okay, so if like was that real, or is that another example of, wow, that's chum in the water for people who believe this stuff is about to happen soon, is because Nimrod's coming back. They're literally trying to resurrect him. Was that real or was that not real? I mean, I guess I could believe it was real, but I also believe that if you believe in secret societies, they might not be putting that kind of stuff in government emails.
Not very secretive, is it?
No, you couldn't get a Freedom of Information Act and find out all the stuff from Skull and Bones. Oh, I guess we shouldn't have said that from the government server.
Well, exactly. I think I use that analogy. It's like, whoops, I've dropped this top secret file in front of my webcam. Oh no. It's kind of, it seems a bit odd. And obviously, if people don't know for context, it's highly theorized and speculated that Nimrod is the Antichrist resurrected. He was the Antichrist resurrected then. So for them to then say that, to play to the conspiracy theorist Christians out there, they purposely seem to release this idea that, we found Nimrod's tomb. At the same time, cloning technology and CRISPR technology is just becoming on the rise, guys. We have the power to resurrect the dead. Is it possible the Antichrist is about to come back and be resurrected from the dead? Is tribulation upon us? It all plays into that narrative.
I just started to wince inside, saying, "I probably said exactly what you just said."
Me too. No, I've been there, and for a long time, I was one of those people in the truth movement who was kind of on that bandwagon, not really understanding that. Well, yeah, like I said, for secret societies, these guys are really bad at keeping secrets. It's kind of I'm starting to realize now. Is this perhaps what they want us to be believing, and is this perhaps because we may be past the millennial reign and tribulation may have already happened? Again, the work you've done about just clearly showing the destruction that has obviously taken place in our ancient past on this earth. Looks like a tribulation style event really did go down, and it was wild.
100%.
Wild.
It's funny that I said when Alpha Talks and I got together and we were debunking Truth Unedited's debunking of the short season, so Truth Unedited was saying that we're not in the little season, we're in the big season of Satan's deception, because the real big deception is the Antichrist agenda. And it's so obvious that that's what it is. And that's when you're like, do you kind of understand what you're just saying? You really are kind of making the devil out to be some kind of a fool. He's not clever. It's so obvious that he's deceiving everyone. But how come everybody's all switched on these YouTube platforms that it's so obvious that maybe that is the hint that, hello, because I've heard people say that many times, and now it seems more likely that they were correct. Is they have access to the book of the Revelation, don't they? So what if they were kind of just slowly throwing out things like the Beyonce thing? It's funny, I actually talked about that on my live stream last night. So the Marvel movies mentioned 616, that's actually their one universe. And when I made a TikTok about this years ago, that 616 came from an early papyrus of the Bible where Revelation was translated not 666 as the number of the beast, but it was actually 616. And I remember that year I was like, oh, well, June 16th is 616. So what if something happens? I said, it's interesting. This movie just came out. Maybe something's going to happen. And sure enough, the trending topic on worldwide on Twitter was Beyonce riding this red horse. And of course, you have the war in Ukraine, and you're like, oh man, it's the red horse from the apocalypse. It's obviously the red horse. That's what they're trying to say. And then Beyonce's on a white horse. She's on a black horse. She's on a lightning colored horse, which could be a pale horse. It is almost was that just me falling right into the trap they were setting of, hey, it's all happening? Because, as we were waiting for, World War III to get kicked off, for the tribulation to start, well, it hasn't yet. Not saying that World War III is not going to happen at some point, but the point is that is pretty on the nose. That she's pictured riding 4 different horses that obviously are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse type stuff. Do they know what what Revelation 6 says? Yes, obviously they do.
Well, have you ever seen The Good Place? It's it's a trash Netflix TV show about heaven and hell, basically. And
I've not seen it.
It's what they do. They always take Christian concepts and pervert them to make them out to be something edgy and cool and weird, and they create their own lore and universe about heaven and hell. Anyway, it turns out there's this demon, this who's looks like a human, he's wearing a human skin. He's running hell, basically, his little pocket of hell, and he's got these people he's been told to torture, and that's his job, to torture them. But what he's done, he's created an illusion of the good place. He makes them believe they're in heaven, but he does all these passive aggressive things to them throughout the series to make their life misery while in heaven, So and the funny thing is that eventually the main character realizes, wait a minute, this is the bad place. We're a bit tricked, And it's a comedy, and at one point he has a change of heart and he becomes a good guy. So he's just, you can see all the agendas at play there already, and there's 33s all over the place. It's one of those type of shows, it's quite obviously just a Freemasonic laugh at all of us at our expense. But Anyway, he says this funny thing, which he reminded me of there, which I thought was really funny. But in order to save his new friends, the humans, who he's had a change of heart about, after torturing them and trying to save them for like over 500 years on a cyclical repeat, because they always wake up and realize, and he has to restart the simulation, try and torture them again without them realizing, and this type of thing. He gets to a point where the bad place people are coming for them to take them to real hell. And he's like, I need to save them. And the funny thing is, fast forwarding, they get saved, okay, by hiding under a train that takes you. It's really convoluted and weird, but he says to them this really interesting thing. They say, we found all your clues and we managed to, because he had to pretend to still be a bad guy around all of his peers. So he was dropping hints all the time in the things he said to try and get them to do the right thing so they could survive. And he says to them, I actually left you about 9,000 clues, but, because I'm living in 9 dimensions, you just picked up on like 3 of them, luckily. And it was enough for you to get to that point. And I'm thinking, when you said that then, it reminded me of this idea. They're probably the media makers, the people in control. They're probably constantly designing new media to always be encoded with revelation symbolism. Always. Every time, without a shadow of a doubt, there'll be something encoded into news events, global scripted events, and mainstream media and movies that will nod and point towards a revelation symbol, whether it be a red horse, a white horse, or whatever. There's always something, a new mark in the beast, or whatever it is, or a war of some kind. But they're doing it on purpose, just hoping that someone somewhere will at least notice one of them and then roll with it. They've actually left thousands of clues out there that hint towards the revelation is coming to a pass now. Tribulation's coming.
You want to hear a new one that I learned that I can't believe I just learned? D-Day, the Normandy invasion, was launched on June 6th at 6 a.m. 1, 2, 3 6s. And I'm like, that's weird. I mean, it actually, I saw something else that I didn't realize that everybody knows is like the invasion of like the mainland Europe was called Operation Overlord. But what specifically D-Day was, its another code name was Operation Neptune. Hello, like Neptune, Poseidon, like literally like Zeus's brother, like the brother of the biblical Satan. Wow. Like, so this stuff has been out there. It's like, was that potentially like some kind of ritual, or was this them just kind of shove it in our faces again? Like, hey, check out this clue. You think they'll get the 666 here? we could make it more obvious than that. But I'm like, I guess I just don't know. What's funny is you said that too about like clues and code. And probably once you wake up to the short season of Satan, like you realize that's the problem is like you have all these people trying to decode the Bible. And you're like, there's no code. Like, it's actually just really straightforward. And it's like, it only seems like it's coded or it's confusing because you've been told that this was written to you and not to the people it was written to. Like, that is the craziest thing when you're like, I said, we lament every now and then. At least I do, getting called a false teacher, a heretic. Vitaly and I did a video about that. Yeah. The destroyed churches, cities from Revelation, the unrepentant cities from Matthew 11 that are all destroyed. And I'm saying Jesus is saying these things to these people and then they're gone. The places don't exist. They're literally buried under the ground. What they dug up was melted stuff. I mean, like something bad happened. And so when you mention that to people, they're like, oh, you're cherry picking stuff. And I'm like, am I? I'm pretty sure I'm like using it in the exact context that Jesus says judgment's coming. This is evidence of judgment. And then we're told like, oh, you guys are trying to make this confusing. I was like, no, you guys are trying to make it confusing because you're trying to say that Jesus was not speaking to the people he was speaking to. Oh, those churches are just shadows of the churches in the future. And you're like, did those churches know they were shadows when the letter came to them? Like, I think that's the problem is like that the enemy, I do believe, they are dropping code. They're trying, maybe that is like, is that again, the duper's delight, the revelation of the method? Are they trying to drop hints that you guys should be picking up on this, but you don't? Or maybe again, they want you to think, hey, top secret file out here. It's terrible if you knew this.
That's what people have always tried to say to me, and what I've always, as somebody been in the game, tried to how do you explain the quite obvious nature of the symbolism everywhere? And people always say, oh, well, some kind of karmic law means they have to tell you what's really going on so they can get away with doing it. And I'm like, they're not stupid. Why do they care about karmic laws of good and evil from God's? Why would they care about any of that? Like, why would they care about following some arbitrary rules like you must tell people the truth before you deceive them? They're not idiots. They don't care about. If they're already condemned to hell, why would they follow any rules whatsoever to help for our benefit? You know, and it never satisfied me with this attitude that, well, they have to tell us the truth, you know, so it's fair and cosmically balanced or something like that. It's like, no, that does not work. But in this new context, if they're not really telling us the truth at all, they're just trying to make us believe we're in tribulation and it's about to unfold. So they're purposely putting all this esoteric symbolism in Illuminati media everywhere to convince the masses that we are living in the time just before Jesus returns. You know, and that's all it's ever been about. And it's not that they're, like I say, karmically trying to purge themselves of any accountability for our own tacit compliance to their evil or something like that. How convoluted and stupid does that actually sound when you hear it back to yourself now? It's like, these people aren't idiots. Like, why would they do that? They wouldn't do that. Like, and they certainly wouldn't follow the rules, but if they're actually intentionally, they want you to see the signs and symbols so you will believe you're in the wrong time in history. It's probably just that simple. And they are there to be discovered. Go discover it, please, and interpret it how we want you to interpret it. Interpret it as though Jesus is about to return. They're in the game of making sure we don't realize we're in the little season, basically. That's right. That's the secret society's job. That's what they do. That's the purpose of them. You know.
Well, I guess I agree with that for the most part. I do think that there is a little bit of the karmic retribution thing, because I think that, again, if the devil's side is the confusing side, because it is like you have many people working for different goals, but as long as it's against what the truth is, the devil's cool with it. But I do think that, like, when you actually find out, like, the levels of, like, hidden things the secret societies go into, like the ciphers and the weird things you'd have to know to really know the things, like the way they actually tell stories that only makes sense if you know something else. Yeah, that's not obvious stuff. Like, obviously, you probably would have to be in the club to know some of the stuff that the real hidden stuff, it remains hidden. Like, we wouldn't find it. So yeah, like, that actually does seem like, again, like the tag, the tail wagging the dog, where you have, like, I think you did a podcast about this, where it's like all these really big brained conspiracy theorists is like, oh, we cracked the code. It's like, oh, good job, because yeah, that's exactly what they want you to say. It's like, yeah, you're being, it's like a judo move where you're going to use your momentum the other way. I mean, but it is interesting, to go back to Tucker for a second, is like, the one thing I found very sus, and I don't know what we end up coming up, again, this is one of these things that go nowhere, the Miami Mall incident, where you had these viral TikToks, and I think, obviously, as somebody who makes TikToks, they control which goes viral, very obviously. You know, what remains in the For You page, they could shut a video down real quick. So you have one group is saying, this is aliens at the mall. And the one thing I've never heard anybody say, again, like literally on the news, is some people are saying that it's Nephilim at the mall. And you're like, all right, now this is a bit on the nose. And I want to say it was very shortly after that is when Tucker went on Roseanne talking about the Nephilim. And you're like, what? Like, but again, we never really found out what happened, because it's like either it was like a riot of kids or it was something else. And then there was something weird with the airport. But you kind of do wonder, like, when something is so obvious and everybody on TikTok is saying I saw a 7-foot Nephilim at the mall. You're like, what are we talking about? Like, you know, that you know what I'm saying? That's that kind of level of, like, that they have used the truth and twisted it. And obviously, again, like, a lot of people that we probably make videos for know just enough to be dangerous now. And now they're sleuths too. So yeah, that's obviously a Nephilim. I heard Paul talking about them. They're wearing clown makeup.
That whole event was weird, because, like I said, it came as quick as Lisa went, you know, everywhere. rows of police cars, an unnecessary amount of police cars. Like, if I've ever seen an unnecessary amount of police force in one place, that Miami Mall incident was one of them. It's kind of like they just created gridlock for no reason whatsoever. For what, you know? And then the mainstream media kind of rolled with that idea, and they wanted you to see it, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm,
the mainstream were okay with you seeing that and then asking questions. What was really going on there? So there is some kind of weird soft disclosure happening right now where they're trying to get the normies to start thinking about things beyond their visual perceptions. Could aliens be real? Could demons be real? That game is clearly at play.
Or maybe it's like that. What we were kind of saying even on the Nephilim Death Squad podcast was like that. Now you can have so if you have a science crowd who believes in aliens and you have a spiritual crowd that believes in angels, demons, and Nephilim, now they're being put in the same context where call them whatever you want, but we both groups believe that there's certain entities that we don't often see, and that's the explanation. But one thing you said, I don't know if it's when you broke up, but it was like the Project Bluebeam stuff.
Yeah,
I didn't really think about this until the context of the little season. If you guys aren't aware, Project Bluebeam is this kind of theory that potentially they're going to fake an alien invasion, fake the second coming of Christ, and in order to do a thing, extract more power of the governments of the world. But what's fascinating is this Project Mongoose was in Cuba when the CIA was trying to depose Fidel Castro. There was literally a Freedom of Information document that they floated the idea of faking the second coming of Christ in Cuba, and then Jesus, or Jesus as they might call him, was telling the people to overthrow Castro. Well, I mean, that's written down. That's not me making that up. What's interesting is the idea of, again, if he already came back, them faking this kind of stuff. It's talk about really more. I think that's even crazier now, the idea that they would fake it. Maybe the people that were talking about faking it already knew he came back, and that's one of the reasons that idea is kind of open, fair game for them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I do, again, I've tried to speculate how they're going to run the end game if it is a little season. And this idea, like you said, they do have this card where they can holographically project a fake alien invasion. And it's likely, if they did do a fake Jesus, trying to convince us it's the second coming, here it is. And then, but really, let's look back. Okay, but we're actually in the little season, but the people don't know this. So Jesus has turned up as far as they're concerned, Then what would happen then is this fake Jesus would have to convince everybody that they need to come together and fight, right? And what would they would probably point to the real Jesus or something. And they would say something along the lines of, this is Satan making his last stand. We need to go and deal with him so we can throw him into the lake of fire. If they did the fake Jesus thing, they would need to convince us this is tribulation, and they would try to gerrymander into the narrative of tribulation that Jesus, with his saints, who he will elect, whatever that is. Wow. I don't know who those saints are actually going to be. And maybe they'll say your benevolent leaders of each of the United Nations have all come together to work together with Jesus to go and fight Satan in one last battle, so we can finally deal with him and have 1,000 years of peace. And it's just a con, isn't it? It's been a long con to get us to that point where. And then they'll probably also say, some of you called us aliens, some of you called us angels, but we're one in the same thing. You were both right. You were both right. Yeah, exactly. So there's many ways they can literally just convince us of this narrative that, it's tribulation, Jesus comes, and then put in this war, this let's go deal with Satan once and for all and cast him in chains for 1,000 years, But really, what this false Jesus has convinced people to do, we'll call it Satan, has convinced people to do is go and attack Jesus, the camp of saints, whatever that camp even is. I mean, is the camp literally a bunch of tents surrounding the beloved city where the saints are chilling out, or is it,
I was just thinking about it. I was like, you know what? I mean, I know that there's a lot more people, and I guess I don't want to be pessimistic, but I'm like, I just feel like there's going to be a certain amount of people that will never accept that Jesus came back. They'll never accept that. You know what I mean? Because I think that a lot of these things make sense when you actually are willing to accept them. But if you're not, like, yeah, this makes so much more sense. Like that everyone could be deceived, like the Bible says, because people are not going to, because it's like, good-hearted people are not going to believe that he could have already come back. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that they're going to be wrong intentioned in believing that, but I think that there's going to be a certain group that will just never accept it. And so they are obviously ripe to be deceived in the end. And that doesn't mean they go to hell or anything like that, but it just means that they're going to be part of like not getting it. And I don't know what that leads to, but all this stuff makes sense. It makes sense that if they could fake something like that, which who knows what they can do. We have no idea what kind of technology they have. Obviously, if they're in league with the devil, which, hello, that's what the Bible says, that he's the one who brings the nations together. Well, then what could they do on that kind of level? And it's like, could he appear as an angel of light? Could he literally appear as Jesus coming back? He could probably play the part. You know what I mean? Like, as far as how would we know he was different than that? And I was like, now that is, do you ever even consider that? Like, what if he tried to show up? Like, what if it was literally, they wouldn't need to do any kind of projections. They wouldn't need to do anything like AI, because an angel just shows up and he looks like what the Bible says Jesus looks like in the book of Revelation. And he says, here's what we got to do.
Well, we know angels can shapeshift and be whatever they want to be. They're not bound to physicality like us. And we also know that although there have been many Satans, there is this particular seraphim / cherub entity that was in rebellion against God. And we'll call it Lucifer, we call it all sorts of names again. But we know that there's an entity, an enemy of ours, an adversary that has known Jesus for eternity and probably knows how to act like him too. Probably has been watching for a long time and knows every single thing about his mannerisms, how he would say things, how he would do things, and how he would present himself, to the point where he could be the perfect mimic. He could be a mime if he wants to be, and why not? Why wouldn't he do that, given the opportunity to fool the nations to go to war with Jesus? Why would he just pretend to be Jesus rallying his troops? It's kind of it's all plausible when it comes to spiritual warfare, and obviously war is war. All's fair in love and war. They're going to do whatever's necessary to make this happen. And it's, again, my game is to try and not be deceived. I'm just trying to figure out when it all does go down, I'll have a good idea of what's really going on. But like you said, most people are not going to readily accept that Jesus Christ has already come back. And I think do you get this a lot? I get these questions. It's kind of like, give me one book where it was written that Christ ruled for 1,000 years, a documentation of that time in history, or something like that, But then I think about it, I'm like, well, there wouldn't be a book, first of all, because, first of all, they can easily just take books. Books don't last that long. Paper is very, very, very limited in its lifespan, and most books do decay quite quickly. As much as you try to preserve them, they do decay, unfortunately. Moisture in the edges is not good for wood pulp, unfortunately. So books wouldn't survive thousands of years as well as you think they would. But the ones that do survive, which would be extremely limited in number, would easily be taken away and hidden, if not burnt or destroyed, which meant we know throughout history many books have been destroyed, and we know the Vatican's holding on to a lot of information as well. What we have to do is observe with our eyes the physical earth around us, like you've been doing. And what we can clearly see is Jesus prophesied that these 7 churches would be destroyed. And we can go and find them and see they were destroyed. They are in rubble. They are in ruins. Now, then people would argue, well, why wasn't it documented about the destruction? Well, because they all died in the destruction. Who had time to pick up a pen and paper and write it all down while it was happening? It's that type of situation. Yeah. I don't think many books would exist personally.
When people say that, like, give me more proof, and it's like, that's why I said sometimes I get frustrated. I'm going to fall back on this to the end, is that when Jesus said, Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13, when he says that this generation will not pass away till all these things come to pass. And then he says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not. To me, that's like, I feel like that literally Jesus is saying that there's going to be a day when nobody believes this ever happened. Like the things that I'm saying, they're going to try to say it never happened. And people are going to look for evidence, and there's not going to be evidence other than the fact that we have Jesus plain words about it. And as people who do care about the truth, and we like searching these things out. We're trying to give you more evidence, but I mean, like, if you can't believe what he says, then it probably won't matter. I could show you we could show you anything. We could show you a book that said, oh, here was Jesus here. He was reigning here. And this is when he visited, St. Petersburg and all this kind of stuff. And people would try to say, well, that's fake. That's not a real book. Like you couldn't, you know what I mean? Like you could not really prove it to people who aren't willing to accept it. I mean, that's why, like us personally, we could have read the Gospels many times before we realized, hey, he was talking to those people he was talking to. And it's like, it's so plain and obvious what's in the Bible now. The context is written in, but yet we couldn't even see it. So like, obviously that's what we always have to kind of fall back on, is that the Bible is true. We all agree that. Even us who are skeptical of everything, we believe the Bible is true. The fact that it says this stuff happened in the times it was going to happen, Jesus, they asked him when. He says when. Like, what else do you need to know? And I think that at that point, we don't know what could have been lost. We don't know what we could be lied to about other than everything. And
why don't think we need the book? I don't think we need. First of all, there probably are books which are just hidden from us. There probably is documentation of that time in history, but all that history has been erased, burnt, destroyed. And most books don't last that long. Like I said, paper is very finite in its time span and its lifespan. It decays quite quickly, unfortunately. So, and so first of all, they could easily just hide history quite easily and just rewrite new books and suppress history. So they probably have done that. They probably have just suppressed all of history, destroyed books, and let time just take care of most of it.
Well, they say, I'm sure you're aware of this, the vaults of the Vatican.
Exactly.
I looked this up a couple weeks ago. They have 58 miles worth of bookshelves at the Vatican. 58 miles. Now, and look this up. I'm not making this up again. They actually say that they're the secret vaults. So there's all these books. Like, what would, if this church was of God, like, why would a church try to hide books from people? Unless
it doesn't make any sense, does it?
Unless there's stuff that they don't want you to know, which obviously, why would it be secret? That's the thing. It's like that you don't really. I get it. You want a secret club. You want to talk about things you don't want us to know. All right, Skull and Bones. I get it. The Vatican. You're supposed to be. If you're supposed to be about the truth, you're supposed to be about Jesus. Well, just let us know what you got. Can we read it? Like, why would they say no? And that's the kind of thing where, like, when you find out all these libraries burned down, like the library in Alexandria, all the things they always talk about, like, oh, well, can you imagine how much knowledge was lost? And I was like, that there was no knowledge lost. Maybe the people lost the knowledge. People kept the stuff that they wanted to know. Like, these people were not barbarians. They weren't going to, the barbarians probably weren't even that bad, obviously, looking back at history. But the point being is, like, that they would have saved books that had worthwhile knowledge in them. And obviously they exist somewhere. But
absolutely. But even then, we don't need the books, because we can clearly see by observing the earth the evidence that tribulation has come to pass. It's in the earth. It's ingrained into it through electrical scarring, quite literally. I think all the evidence is there if you just observe it. Then we have the Tartarian stuff as well, which is quite obvious. There is evidence, that we call it Tartarian, but we're starting to realize this is clearly evidence of an advanced civilization that lived not that long ago. And this fits the narrative of the millennial reign once again. And I think if you look outside of, I need a textbook that tells me it's happened, and just go out there and explore the earth, you'll realize it's telling you the testimony of the millennial reign. It's written in the buildings. It's literally written in stone that Jesus was here and he made a mark and he built the infrastructure and he's created this beautiful thing which we now live in the ruins of.
Last night I was talking about Fallout again with J Dreamer Z.
Oh, there you go.
And I was saying that before I looked into a lot of this stuff, I just said it looks like somebody nuked the West Coast. So now they make a movie about, or like the based on a video game, Fallout, and they don't even have to dress up the landscape. It looks like something happened out on the western part of the United States. because something did. I mean, like something obviously happened there that we don't even know what it was. And I think that like that's, to me, that needs a reasonable explanation. And to most people who believe the Bible, they would try to fall back on saying Noah's flood. And you're like, this stuff doesn't look like it was water did this. It looks like fire did this. It looks like something else did this. The rocks are melted. They're not, like we know what water does to rocks. It doesn't turn them into mushrooms. But it's kind of like similar to like what Tucker was talking about, like when he got into like the 9/11 stuff, and he was saying that the fact there's still classified documents regarding this, why would there be in a free country, in a democracy? It's because they're trying to cover up misdeeds. Like that's why you don't have it. So it's kind of like when I first started to wake up to certain conspiracies, I was like of the mind of, like, let's try to debunk this. And I'm like, okay, what's the answer to this question? And they're like, they don't tell you. Okay, so why don't they tell you this question? And you're like, okay, because they're hiding something. So when you hear like the mainstream explanation for like the Grand Canyon, all the weird rock formations, and it's preposterous, or they just, they try to push millions of years on stuff that obviously look like it could happen with a lot of heat really fast, or like, something massive happened at some point. And then, I always go back to the mud flood. It's like the fact that they don't even talk about it, that there's buried stuff all around the whole world, everywhere. Explain to me how that could happen. And it does not sound like Noah's flood. Like I said, you go all the way to Easter Island, you have those Moai statues. Hey, guess what? They have bodies. They're buried under the ground. Okay, so how did they get buried underground? Well, even like Göbekli Tepe.
Noah's flood.
I remember hearing that, was it Graham Hancock, and they're saying that they likely buried their temple really fast because invaders were coming. They say that about like the Aztecs. Yeah, they buried everything, and you're like, did they level out the whole ground afterwards? Like everywhere? Like, can you imagine somebody saying, bury your house, Paul? You could probably do it, but it would look like a pyramid, right? Because you would eventually. Okay, but now you have to make it flat. So you have to bury the rest of the town. Like, that's what's happened. That's what's happened all around the whole world. And to me, maybe that's not evidence of a millennial kingdom, but that's maybe evidence of Armageddon. That's evidence of something that really bad happened. And the fact that there's no written records of it points me to believe that it's the biggest conspiracy there is.
Oh, hands down. I mean, it's not even just that. I mean, I haven't looked into this much, but I do remember seeing things years ago. There are literally cities just underwater. Like, just off the coast of places, entire cities underwater and just gone. And we do know the tribulation event, it literally moved the earth. Like, everything just shifted. Continents were created, I believe, in that moment, it seems. Whatever happened during that time was so tumultuous. Every volcano went off. Every fault line cracked and broke and separated. Everything moved and shifted. So, we know what liquefaction does to mud. We know what vibrations can do to the earth. We know the effects of vibrations on the earth, that it can create mud. We know these things, and we can actually test it and do it on a small scale. You can shake a box full of mud and watch things sink. We know it works. And it's kind of, these are provables. If you want to use science to our advantage, you can prove that liquefaction of the mud happens quickly. Things like electrical bursts into the ground destroy and create caverns quickly. This isn't just something that can happen over millions of years. It's kind of, we have all these evidences on our side to back up what we're saying. We're not just like pulling this out of thin air, exactly. But people want a book, especially Christians. They want I want a book to tell me that Jesus ruled for 1,000 years, and I want to know what it was like during that time, exactly.
What's true is, again, we have to just lean on the Bible, and we can continue to search for physical evidence, and we obviously will do that because we're interested in it. But I mean, like, when it comes down to it, I think that these are hard issues. I mean, these are hard issues that if you don't want to know, you won't. And it won't even matter that you can point to these things because they'll point to saying, oh, it's just Paul and JT saying these things and not, their pastors, not this or that. But like I said, I'll just rest on that Jesus said, Heaven and earth will pass away. My words won't. I'm not going to give you all the answers. I'm not here to give you all the answers. I'm here to ask questions and hopefully let you guys think about these things. And obviously it's the Father who's going to, draw you to Jesus anyway. So, but anyways, Paul, it was awesome having you again. Please check out Paul's channel, Understanding Conspiracy. And obviously you said the book is almost available.
Yeah, I'm in the proofreading process now, and I'm pretty much almost there. I've got about 4 more chapters to get through, so I'm hoping by the end of the month I can have this thing out and published. I've got the front cover and the design all done and dusted. It's just those final putting it together things. Some legal stuff is cleared, trademarks are cleared, all that kind of stuff's ready to go now. So it's up to me just to finish proofreading and throw volume 1 out there. And volume 2 will be out probably next year, because it's turning into a huge, thick wad. So I've had to cut it into 2 books. The first book is going to be like 300 pages or something stupid, and then the second book is going to probably be more. But yeah, the Nephilim Like Clouds book is going to be published very soon.
Well, awesome. That's great. I'm definitely going to get myself a copy. All right, bro. God bless. God bless you guys back home. See you next time.